Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Urbana City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons.
Present.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. The first item is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. We have February 2nd, 2015, and February 9th, 2015, a special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ammons, seconded by Roberts. Any additions or corrections to either of those? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? Petitions and communications. Anyone want to address the Urbana City Council?
Yeah, I'd just like to communicate as a representative of the council to the IDOT Traffic Stop Study Task Force that on Saturday we will have a community meeting at the Civic Center from 1:30 to 4:30, which will be for the purpose of the task force to do active listening to the community. There aren't too many people attending here, but anybody who well, all of you all, and I guess anybody who is maybe watching this or will watch it on the TV. The task force itself will meet again at 5:30 on Wednesday in these chambers, and I think we're coming to a point, I won't talk about specific issues, but I think we're coming to a point where we're starting to focus on some different aspects of the problem. It's taking shape. So I think the meeting and the discussion will be interesting.
Is the meeting at the Civic Center going to be broadcast
I don't know.
or recorded, at least?
Boy, it should be recorded.
I think it should be. Yeah.
I
So, okay,
agree
we'll
with
check it
that,
out.
but I don't know that. I
Okay.
don't know if arrangements have been made for that.
I have Reverend Dr. Evelyn Barnett Underwood, who does not wish to speak but wants to express her concerns about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. Did I get your name right, ma'am? Thank you. Merci. Anyone else? Okay. Unfinished business, I don't think we have any that we're going to deal with today. Reports of standing committees, the Committee of the Whole.
Yes, on behalf of the committee, first item is motion for Brick Street reconstruction with concrete, Broadway Avenue, Stebbins Drive to Oakland Avenue. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by
Marlin.
Marlin. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Ammons.
So I believe most of the council members received this communication from Mr. Reynolds about the brick streets, and I just wanted to sort of, since it's in my ward, I wanted to make sure that we do the due diligence of actually speaking to some of the concerns that he raised. I think I have some of the answers, but I would certainly rather refer to Bill, if you will. Thanks. Did you also receive that, Bill, the email? Okay, thank you.
Let me go over a little bit of road construction design philosophy, okay? Historically, roads built in the United States have been designed for a 20-year design life. So what that means is, you look at the type of street classification, whether it be an arterial, collector, residential. You look at the traffic volumes currently and projected. There's ways of analyzing the type of traffic mix, percentage of trucks, buses, cars, single unit vehicles, blah, blah, blah. There's formulas to be used, and you come up with basic designs. And that then determines what sort of pavement thickness, whether it be asphalt or concrete. You look at your subbase, which your subgrade, which is your dirt or clay or whatever's underneath where you're going to build your road, and what is the strength of that, and that helps you determine how thick of a base you may have to build up, whether it be stone or there's what's called lime stabilizing to get you a good working platform, et cetera. I go through this because what Craig talked about last Monday is that what we have been doing with our street design is we've been going to a 40-year design life. Now, does that cost more money than a 20-year design life? The answer is yes, it does. We could build roads to a 100-year design life if you like, but the capital or upfront cost is usually prohibitive, and it's kind of like, think about your roof. Do you want a 20-year shingle or you want a 100-year shingle? Maybe the additional cost is another $10,000 or $20,000, but you may not have that extra money to go with a 100-year roof, so a lot of times we have a 20 or 30-year shingle, not a 100-year shingle, or a metal roof or what have you. Similar thinking with road building. So the point is that rather than, and I'm rounding off or generalizing, rather than going with maybe a 6-inch thick concrete base, we're going to go with a 7 or a 7¼ inch, which will, that extra inch and a half will give us another 20 years life. So it's not a whole lot more, okay? In his email, he talked about, well, bricks, we said it was like a 70-year, 75-year. That was a guess, okay? I think another person had testified last Monday night, who lives on that block and remembers the days when he lived on Broadway, that it was a brick street from Country Club Road to University Avenue. Well, today it's a stretch between Stebbins and Division. Well, think about it. Division is the top of the hill, Stebbins is the bottom of the hill. The balance is pretty flat. That tells me drainage was a contributing cause to the failure of the brick street now, north of Division or south of Stebbins, okay? So that brick held out a little bit longer than the balance. So really, if you want to look at design life, it wasn't a 75-year design life. It was something less. Mm-hmm. But because it had really good drainage, i.e. a sharp gradient, there wasn't a lot of standing water, in the street, if you will. Even if it was a 70 or 80-year design life, we would be far better off spending a few more dollars to do an 80-year concrete design life and still not spend $1.5 million or $1 million. So, everything is about trying to optimize, and really this particular discussion had more to do with, do we want brick or do we want concrete? It wasn't to be an exercise in life cycle costing. We can do a bona fide life cycle costing, but on the floor, Craig was kind of doing that for you. But I think if City Council wants us to design 80-year design life streets, we can do that, and that's great. But I will tell you, there's a whole lot of streets that won't get fixed because we're going to be sinking a lot of capital up front to fix that street, and to the expense of not doing others. With respect to his comment on Windsor Road, I think you all know this by now, but that was an outlier problem that we had. And yes, it didn't hold up for 20 years. It should have held up for a lot longer. But generally speaking, a 20-year design life concrete or asphalt street is a fine design parameter to use. It's been used for 100 years in the United States. All the IDOT and AASHTO designs, that's pretty standard. What happens is when you get past that 20-year, that you may need to do more crack sealing. It depends on the street now, but it's used concrete. There may be more crack sealing you do. There may be some surface spalling you might have to address. There may be some full-depth patching here or there, or joint repairs you have to do. But even at 25 or 30 years, it's not full street replacement. We have many, many concrete streets in town. I could hop in a car and we could show you that are very much 40, 50 or more years old. In fact, in your area, take Central Avenue between University Avenue and Park Street. Mm-hmm. That street is over 80, maybe 90 years old, and it has had very little work done to it. Concrete Street by Carle Hospital. So there are very good examples of streets that can last much longer than the quote-unquote design life. Mm-hmm. Design life is basically a metric we use to help design a pavement strength. It's similar to in the water flooding business, we talk about design storms. It's engineering terminology to help guide us as to what level of protection do you want in a pipe or in a creek, or in this case, Boneyard Creek. For example, if we want 100-year protection, that then tells engineers as to what types of flows, volumes, stage, the elevation to design for, to store water, convey water. It's a similar type of use. So without going word by word, that's generally a response to that email, is that it's not a true apples comparison. I mean, his logic makes sense by what was presented last Monday night. I mean, I could come to that same logic, that, well, you're better off spend the $1.2 million now because you may have replaced that concrete street 2 or 3 times. Well, in reality, we're probably not going to replace that street 2 or 3 times. There may be patching and other remedial work. Or if you want us to really use a 80-year design life, well, then I'm going to come back and say, all right, we're going to have a 10 or 12-inch thick concrete pavement. It's not going to be $400,000. It may be $500,000 or $600,000, plus the curb, plus the ramps, plus the sidewalk that the Park District wants to do, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have that money. We would be delaying the project, and we would be doing less work, maintenance or other work elsewhere in the city.
Okay. I just wanted to, to speak to it. It was an
Yeah.
issue that was raised. I do think that there's maybe a little bit more clarity that could be offered in relationship to the Windsor Road, and because what's in most people that I talk to, and I think I hear in the email from Mr. Reynolds, is that, what about Windsor Road?
Mhm.
Everybody's talking about Windsor Road.
Sure.
What was the difference between what we'll do on Broadway versus Windsor Road?
Well, basically, we're taking almost extreme steps not to repeat what happened on Windsor Road through our concrete mix design, through our quality control at the batch plant, through our quality control in the field. What happened on Windsor Road was undetected by all the best efforts of material and testing that occurred back in 1990, 1991. And it was an unknown circumstance of a chemical reaction that was not happening in the state of Illinois at the time. And that's an alkali silica reaction that occurred within the concrete mix. And we now have ways to look for that and to mitigate that reaction so it doesn't reoccur. But for a period of time between there and maybe, well, less than 10 years ago, did we detect it, or the city of Champaign detect it, or even others. IDOT has a notable case on Interstate 39 north of Normal that has an ASR reaction going on, and they're fussing with how to replace an interstate highway that has failed prematurely. So it's an unusual situation, but Windsor Road had this alkali silica reaction that was occurring, and there was also some other cracking, decracking that was occurring on Windsor Road that, what I would say, caused the pavement to prematurely fail.
Okay.
But I can't say that there was any fault based on the specification, the mix design, the type of testing that was done in 1990 that was flawed or whatever. It's just something that now IDOT and others are now more aware of.
But it's certainly
And-
something that you don't foresee happening for
Correct.
this situation.
That is
Thank
correct.
you.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, thanks to the Archives Department at the Urbana Free Library, we have access to ordinances that go back to the 1800s. And so I asked the archivist there to dig up the ordinance that actually allowed the paving in brick of North Broadway. And they found it. It was in 1914. So it is just about 100 years old. It wasn't completed until 1916, but it says it was from the Wabash Railroad up to the north to Park Street. It was 15 feet on each side of the center line, and then from Park Street up to Oakland was 12 feet 1 inch on each side of the center line, and it says it was. Is paved brick on a concrete foundation with sand cushion and asphalt filler. So that's, I guess, what you can expect to find, depending on what repairs have been done since then. There might have been other stuff. So that was the north part of Broadway. If you go south from the railroad tracks down to Green Street, that was actually laid in 1892, and they found the ordinance for that too. So I don't know how much it costs to core those streets, but maybe it'd be cheaper just to contact the archivist at the library and find out what's underneath. So, oh, and then back then also they had the Board of Local Improvements, so they assessed the neighboring property owners for the cost of the street. Luckily, we don't do that anymore. Or I guess we do on some new streets. Then also, they found a kind of interesting item because that part around the courthouse that was laid in 1892, they started thinking about fixing in 1906. It was actually 2 courses of regular construction brick. And they didn't get around to fixing it till 1928 because it was so controversial. People seemed to like the bricks. But in 1906, when they started talking about it, said it was suggested that the 4 streets forming the courthouse square be paved with asphalt. 2 of these streets are present unpaved, but the contract will soon be let to pave these with brick. Asphalt streets around the big county building would greatly improve the appearance of things in general and be in keeping with the splendor of the courthouse and jail. Decatur has tried asphalt and is pleased with the results. It also talks about asphalt. There's no street more citified or beautiful than Asphalt Street, if properly put down. It does away with the loud clatter of horses' hoofs. It's better and less injurious to the rubber-tired buggy, and is doubly advantageous to the cyclist. No kind of pavement has yet equaled the asphalt for beauty and service. So this was 1906. So I just thought I'd share that bit of history about the street.
Thank you very much for that. Eric?
So I guess I'm wondering whether there is a cost analysis, whether there's a feasible cost analysis that says whether one does concrete or brick, what is the optimum way of doing this that will result in the lowest total costs, that is, capital costs and maintenance and repair costs over, let's say, a 20 or 30-year period. I think your judgment that I'm hearing from you is that even if you factored all of that in, you could probably do better with a concrete street than a brick street. But I guess I'd like to think a little bit out of the box and say it might be reasonable. Everybody hates to borrow money. But if you're going to save more money in maintenance costs than the cost of borrowing, than the cost, for example, of issuing a bond, then it would make sense to do that for the differential part that we don't have in hand. So I'm wondering if it's, and maybe, that kind of analysis would help in any case to figure out, what depth to lay the concrete and so forth. So I'm wondering if that is a feasible kind of analysis to do, if people aren't too shocked at the notion of actually issuing a bond, if that would actually save money, save more than the cost of issuing the bond in terms of reduced maintenance and repair costs.
If we want to try to optimize a life cycle design for this pavement, we can do that. I don't have that answer, obviously, what you're asking for. We were basically looking to start from scratch, remove what's out there, and go through our usual design for a concrete or asphalt street. In this case, a concrete street would be a better solution, and leave it at that. We weren't trying to compare it to preserving the brick, because the brick in and of itself is more costly, as we said before. But if you want us to look at some sort of optimization, we can do that.
Yeah, I don't know how other people feel about that, and I apologize that I wasn't able to come to the meeting last week when it would have been appropriate to raise this issue. But is that worth doing? Is it? I don't know how much of your time or your staff time would be taken with that, but maybe
Generally, it's a fairly involved process that I'm guessing is probably a 40 to 80-hour work assignment by probably Craig. I've seen Windsor Road had a life cycle design report, and maybe I should make a copy for you all to see, and it was probably 20, 30 pages. So by the consultant that did the work that was submitted to IDOT and Federal Highway. So if that's the sort of effort you want us to do, we can do that. It will, delay our productivity, but we can do that.
Okay, Charlie?
Yeah, I guess the two thoughts here is we probably don't have the staff time to put into that, but it would be fun to look at the Windsor Road one as an example, because that would answer the kind of thinking. The other issue is that I'd much prefer to save our bonding for really big ticket items like new buildings and space needs. We've got several pretty pressing space needs, and I foresee us needing our bonding authority to replace buildings out at the landscape recycling center, public works, and so on. So if we piddle away our money on smaller bonds, and we already we did Windsor Avenue or Windsor Road with bonds because we had to. So I really don't want to go that way myself. One quick question for Bill: what is the lifespan on the Windsor Road? Is it a 20 or a 40-year concrete?
Yeah, I want to say 40, but let me look it up to be sure. I think we went the extra mile, but I need to confirm that.
Dennis, and then Diane.
Yeah. Right, so Richard Reynolds, who sent us the email, he lives on Urbana Street, so he's in my ward, and most of the people, the preservation for a brick and support for that mostly comes out of my ward. We did Alice Engelbretson about 8 or 10 years ago sponsored the first really significant workshop on relaying brick sidewalks, and the Huna neighborhood actually laid about a 40-foot long section of sidewalk on Maple Street, just north of California, as a community project. So I'm respectful of the need and the interest to preserve the brick streets of Illinois, just like the sidewalks. One thing that I've noticed, we do have and I go up and down East Illinois Street very often, and this is a brick street in our community, pretty much from Vine Street all the way to Cottage Grove. And Bill, in the need or the desire to maintain as many streets as we can in brick, can I ask you about what I observed that very often when there is, say, like sewer work or some work in the past that's been done, and I don't know if this would be our standard today, but on that street, what we've had happen is the bricks had been removed. I don't know what date. Could have been 25 years ago, for all I know. And it's been replaced by pseudo brick, which is basically concrete poured with a top surface treatment to suggest cobblestones. We see this also in the intersections in the downtown at Elm Street and Broadway. And these don't seem to wear very well, especially where there's heavy traffic. And it's also, I would say, kind of a cheat on the preservation of the brick streets that we are committed to now somewhat by ordinance. So in the future, when we are talking about saving brick streets or repairing sections of brick streets, because that was one of the options we had, would be that we would only do a section of the street, the worst section. Does the City Public Works Department have a commitment to actually using brick? Or will we see faux brick being laid in, with cement and with a cobbled surface treatment in the future on other streets that currently are all brick.
Yes, and we've done that. The map that we showed last week that had the listing of the 3.5 or so miles of brick street, we've done brick repairs not all that long ago. I want to say in the Orchard, south of Washington Street area, I bet you that was within the last 10 years. And we did just that same process of a concrete, sub-base and a kind of an asphalt filler, sand filler with the brick on top. So on Illinois Street, the stamped concrete replication of brick was done many years ago when the old train tracks were removed. And why brick wasn't used there, I can't answer that. But I do know on Illinois Street within the last 5 years there's been a water main replacement, new water main installed in the length of the street. And those bricks were salvaged in the Parkway. The water main was installed. The contractor backfilled, put the concrete sub-base in, and did the brick lay in hand by hand. That was Illinois American Water Work. So that is our standard. That's our right-of-way requirement, if you will, for construction on brick streets. So that detail is in place now.
Okay, that's great. Okay, I wanted to clarify that.
Diane?
Because the historic
Sorry.
record is, makes me question it.
Mhm.
I would just say that I would not be in favor of doing any kind of life cycle study on this particular street. I'd rather have our staff and funds be directed to other projects. But three things persuade me to go along with this reconstruction in concrete. One is the cost, $600,000 versus, was it 1.3 million? Give or take. The second was the comment last week about being able to focus on maintaining the other brick streets in town. I lived, like I said, on Nevada Street for 27 years. I loved it, and I would hope that that can be maintained as a brick street. And I think focusing our resources on the streets that actually are fairly long in length make for a better aesthetic appearance. And third, this is 2 blocks of brick out of the entire stretch of Broadway, and it just, at this point, aesthetically, it's kind of jarring. And to go from concrete to brick and back to concrete, and then the Park District indicated support for the cement in terms of its vehicles, and it needs to be able to stand up to the heavy bus traffic that area gets. So all in all, I think we'd be better off making the most cost-effective decision here and using our salvaged bricks and our resources to maintaining our longer stretches of brick streets in our residential neighborhoods.
Mike Madigan?
So, quick question for the historian here, real quick. Did you say that what you found was that these bricks are laid on a concrete base?
Yes, it said a concrete foundation with a sand cushion and asphalt filler.
Okay, because I think what we were led to believe was, the thought was this was on a dirt base. That was what we were talking about last week.
And that's what the cores showed.
Interesting.
And that's why you core pavement.
So the contractor got away with something there, it sounds
Well,
He was paid for concrete, but he
I don't know if you want to jump to that conclusion,
okay.
but what we cored
Yeah.
was, fill and dirt, not.
I'm
okay.
sure we're not besmirching anyone who's alive at this point in time.
This wasn't the contract. This was the recommended ordinance. So who knows
Oh.
what the contract eventually ended up as, I guess.
Okay.
But this is what was passed, I think.
Okay, so but apparently what you see now is it's a dirt base. Okay. Well, I lived in Springfield for 20 years, and for a good portion of that time, I had the pleasure of living on a street that was a brick street, and I really enjoyed it. It was a brick street that was probably not in the best repair, and cars going up and down are a bit noisy, but it was pretty cool, and I enjoyed it. The city actually, the city of Springfield does have a fairly aggressive repair and rehabilitation program, and they do rebuild residential brick streets. And they did, actually, while I lived there, they rebuilt that street and took care of a lot of the asphalt patching that had been done over time. But the interesting thing about that street was it was truly a residential street. It was not a public transportation street. It was not something that was involved in heavy traffic, big vehicles, buses, and whatnot. So it just seems to me that, this is not my word, so I certainly defer to and appreciate, the wishes of Mr. Ammons. This is his ward, and he's hearing from people, and I'm not. But I really do think that we ought to give due consideration to the heavy traffic that is on that road and Crystal Lake Park and that kind of thing, and that's a big deal. Sure, bricks are really tough, but it's what they're laid on, and there's a whole lot of cost that goes into that base. So can we achieve that more economically, in the short term, and maybe not have a 70-year road, but maybe have a 40-year road at a very good discount on what a relaid brick street would be? I think that probably, in my opinion, ought to outweigh the cost of reconstructing the brick street.
Okay, Charlie?
Yeah, just to reiterate, the last point that Diane makes is, it's a short stretch at this point. It's not like the entire length of the road is still brick. If it were, I think we'd be having a different discussion. And like Mike says, is that we have heavy traffic here, which leads me to another concern I forgot to raise earlier. If we do pave this in concrete, the speed bump that is essentially created by those bricks are going to lead to this turning into a throughway and an alternate to Cunningham Avenue. And I can see people coming in on Kerr and Country Club and such, and then this becomes a speedway. So I suspect we're looking at a stop sign, or maybe two, somewhere along that stretch. Maybe at Kerr, maybe somewhere else in there. So that is a concern that I have, because I think once that road is repaired, we're just going to see more traffic, and we need to be prepared to deal with that, because at the same time, Crystal Lake Park is highly used park with the pool. They're going to put in a bike path, multi-use lane there. We're going to see more kids and bikes going up and down. We will need to watch for speed.
Okay, we have a motion by Smythe, seconded by Marlin. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
I'll also say yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Okay, next up is ordinance number 2015-212, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for fiscal year 2014-15, various items from the Finance Department. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
I think you left
Mayor
someone out.
Pressing?
Yes. That motion carries.
Next up is ordinance number 2015-213, an ordinance approving a redevelopment agreement with 129 North Race LLC, 129 North Race Street. For the committee, I so move.
I'll second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes, I
Mr.
approve.
Smythe?
Yes. Okay.
That motion carries.
Next up is ordinance 2015-214, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance fiscal year 2014-15, redevelopment agreement with 129 North Race LLC. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Marlin. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Mayor Pressing.
Yes. That motion carries. Charlie?
So with respect to this
Oh, sorry.
agenda item, as a liquor license holder in the city of Urbana, state law precludes me from participating, so I shall recuse myself.
Thank you.
I thought I'd let Mike get his standard disclaimer in before I mentioned it. Last item is ordinance number 2015-216, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 343, increasing the number of Class C liquor licenses for SZDB Incorporated doing business as Vine Street Marathon at 508 South Vine Street, Urbana, Illinois. For the committee, I so move.
I'll second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you, Charlie. Reports of special committees. Reports of officers. I went to the ACLU thing on Wednesday, as a number of people did, and it was about the criminal justice system. And one thing that was clear was a solution of having a mental health court. So I will be bringing a resolution to the city council for us to recommend that to the county, because it does affect how our police do their jobs. And Bill Brown has handed out copies of the program for all of you, and we're also going to be running it on UPTV. Charlie.
Yeah, Mayor, and you know, last year before, we had a chance to add a half-time social service component to the police department, or with the police department and other agencies to help with mental health issues, and I continue to think that that's a good idea if we can figure out how to do it.
Okay. Eric?
I haven't actually spoken up about this, but I've been following, as I guess other people have, the discussion about the jail, county jail, which seems to be predicated on the notion that we will, for the indefinite future, incarcerate as many people as we now incarcerate, which I would hope is a really bad assumption. So I'm going to go to the next study session on that. I don't know if we want to consider it as a council, whether we have any sort of position on that. It certainly affects our constituents. And I just personally feel that it doesn't make sense to plan on the assumption that the planning is being done right now, and that we ought to be thinking about how to reduce the incarceration rate.
Well, I think if you take a look at the program that you got on the DVD from Bill, that'll give you some ideas of what other cities are doing. Mike?
So without looking at the DVD and just following up on Eric's comments, I would agree. And I think that an interesting development too, and hopefully the county board is tuned into this, is the governor of Illinois has decided to take a look at the entire criminal code and some reform of that, and hopefully that will result in lesser penalties for some nonviolent offenses that will ease the burden on county jails and local law enforcement. We'll see how that shakes out, but I would 100% agree that the county board ought to be taking all this into consideration and take a bit of pause.
So,
Eric?
just following up on that, because it looks as though from, it's just an amazing convergence across people who often disagree about other things, that this is a direction that we ought to go. I would be happy to volunteer to try a draft of a resolution, and just share it with everybody and maybe tune it so that we, if people think that we could, as a body, we could make a communication to the county board.
Okay, did you want to say something, Libby?
Officers report.
Yes.
I'm pleased to announce that we've received a small grant from the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency for Urbana as a certified local government. We'll be receiving $2,450 to create an interactive web-based map highlighting the city's most historically significant places, providing user-guided walking and driving tours and pop-up information as links and podcasts. So this will pull together previously existing information and new information as part of our work towards having a more interactive website. And I'd like to thank Kevin Garcia for putting that grant together. Also, tomorrow is our quarterly Business and Development Luncheon, formerly known as the Developers Roundtable. Tomorrow, this will be at the Civic Center, and the topic is Pitch Perfect, Fast Takes on Urbana's Commercial Properties. The event is perfect for commercial real estate brokers, lenders, developers, and prospective business investors in the market for commercial real estate in Urbana. And it will be filmed for being televised on UPTV, but all council members are invited to attend.
Thank you. Any other reports of officers? Okay. We have new business, ordinance number 2015-02-017, an ordinance approving and causing publication of the official zoning map of the city of Urbana, Illinois.
So
This
moved.
sounds like something for Libby.
Yeah, and just bringing this forward, it's an annual exercise that we do pursuant to the state law. It's gone through the Plan Commission. The amendments were put together this year by Kevin Garcia. And in summary, we had a couple of rezonings this past year. Soccer Planet went to a B3 designation, also the Westenhaver annexation rezoning not too long ago. On subdivisions, we've added 33 new lots to the city of Urbana. We designated one new landmark, the Zeta Tau Alpha Sorority House, and we redistricted the Boneyard Creek District pursuant to the flood map changes, as well as added and corrected some vacated rights-of-way.
So what about the consideration of the gambling?
That will be a text amendment. These are just the map changes for publication of the new map. And the text amendment is under study by the Plan Commission. I believe they'll be considering that Thursday night this week. They did have some comments and asked us to make some additional changes. And we're recommending that these be allowed either by conditional use or by right in 3 of our business zones. So that will be coming to the council next council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Libby?
I made a motion.
Yes.
I'll second that.
And that was to approve the ordinance? I approve.
Yes.
Okay. Motion by Smythe, seconded by Jacobson. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Madigan.
Yes.
Miss Marlin.
Yes.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Mr. Smythe.
That motion carries. Diane?
I have one more announcement. If you haven't RSVP'd for the Champaign County Economic Development Corporation's annual Innovation Celebration, please do so. It's March 3rd at Krannert Center lobby, starting at 5:30. And this is an amazing showcase of talent and resources and innovation that's occurring in Champaign County. And if you've never gone before, it's amazing. It's just amazing. So be sure to RSVP.
Thank you very much. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.